Testing. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are here for Sunday school here at Harvest of Hope Christian Center. I hope you are having an amazing, amazing Sunday morning. So for today's Sunday school, how many of you know what book of the Bible we will be reading from? Judges. What chapter are we reading from in Judges? Judges chapter 2. Who has that ready to read for us? Okay, let's go ahead and read it. We're hopping right into Judges chapter 2, verses 10 through 19. Somebody read it when you have that.
And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served Balaam. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, and the gods of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord and served Baal and Ashtaroth. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel.
It was hot.
Hot, yes, sir. He delivered them into the hands of spoilers and spoiled them, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies round about, so that they could not any longer stand before their enemies. Whithersoever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil, as the Lord had said, and as the Lord had sworn unto them. And they were greatly distressed. Nevertheless, the Lord raised up judges, which delivered them out of the hands of those that spoiled them. And yet they would not hearken unto the judges. But there went a whoring out after other gods, and bowed themselves unto them. They turned quickly out of the ways which their fathers walked in, obeying the commandments of the Lord, but they did not so. And when the Lord raised them up judges, then the Lord was with the judges and delivered them out of the hands of their enemies all the days of the judge. For it repented the Lord because of their groaning, by reason of them that oppressed them and vexed them. And it came to pass, when the judges were dead, and they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers, in following other gods to serve them and to bow down unto them, they ceased not from their own doings, nor from their stubborn ways.
There we go. What stood out to you about that? Anything stand out from what was read? Or were y'all falling asleep?
Well, I think when it said they did evil in the sight of the Lord, so often we use our compass
judgment
as, as being the balancing stick, but God is far more of a better judge than we are.
Yeah, because that's the only judge that really matters, right? So let's do a little bit of background. How in the world did we get here? So we start out with the Israelites being condemned or called out by God about the life that they're living. It says the Bible tells us that Israel had done evil in the sight of the Lord. Who remember hearing that? Evil in the sight of the Lord. Anybody remember hearing that? Perfect. Okay. And so we got to ask ourselves, what evil did they do? Well, they had fallen into the trap of serving other gods. Now they're living in the land that God brought them into, but instead of living a life that would worship God, they're instead angering that God by worshiping the gods of those who are still around them. So once again, we got to ask, how did we get here? How in the world do you get brought out of Egypt? How in the world do you get brought into the land flowing with milk and honey? How do you get brought into the land of Canaan, but still are worshiping other gods? Yes, ma'am. There it is. That's where we're going. I wish you had a microphone. What she said in the back of the room was that because God said, kill everybody before you go in. Kill everyone. And because they didn't do that way back when, now they're running into all of these issues and all of these problems. That's what we're going to talk about. So the root of the problem, as crazy as it sounds to say, the root of the problem is not worshiping other gods. The root of the problem is that they were disobedient from the very beginning. And get this, the fruit of that problem is that they're worshiping other gods. So the root was the disobedience way back here, but the fruit that's showing itself, the fruit that God is upset about in this season with this generation of people is the fact that they are worshiping other gods. But this is a generational issue. This crosses multiple generations. So we talked about the root, we talked about the fruit. There's still a plant in the middle. This ain't nowhere on my notes, but it's good. There's a plant in the middle. So what you're going to find out when you read is the root is, of course, the fact that they were disobedient. They didn't kill everyone like they were supposed to. The plant, another issue that happens in the middle, is in between generations, there was no teaching of who God was and the essence of his relationship with his chosen people. So the generation of those who are actually worshiping other gods have no relationship with the God of the universe. And that was the failure of their parents, who didn't teach them or train them up in the way that they should go, so that when you get to this place, yes, you're going to be in a land surrounded with other influences, surrounded with other people who are worshiping other little g gods. If they were trained up, they should still be able to withstand and be holy in the midst of living in an environment where their parents didn't purify it as it should have been. So their parents failed. Now they're growing up as a plant amongst other weeds and thistles, hoping to choke them out. But because of that failure, because they weren't taught or given that relationship, now they're sitting here growing up the wheat as well as the tare. But because they weren't given the tools by their parents that they needed, the tare is going to choke out the wheat. So let's go into the word, because that was good. So
You saying that, but now that brought something to my mind.
what did it bring to your mind?
That's what's happening in the world today.
Man.
And raising our children, the parents are not teaching them and not carrying them to church.
There
They're
you
not
go.
teaching them at home and not carrying them to church where they can be taught. And then look at the world and look what our boys are doing. The young
Yeah.
boys are doing
Yeah.
every day.
And it goes beyond, I think you're right on the money, but when you think about how it applies to our life,
Yes.
because of disobedience in the past,
Yes.
we've allowed, or generations before us have allowed, for issues to crop up within society.
Yes.
What used to be different from the normalcy of what society would say is now acceptable and okay.
Yes.
And because of that failure, now our parents haven't taught us, and so now society looks more like the world than when it used to be more aligned with the word. And so even if you wanted to live outside of the world of the word, you would be, the world would look at you and be like, that's not right. That's kind of crazy. But because of the failure of our parents, the failure of those generations before us, now the world, our society, looks more like the world and less like the word. And so the word is now the abnormal person walking around. So now when you come over here, you're now surrounded by little g gods, surrounded by little g influences, surrounded by all of this sin, yet we've not been taught what's necessary for us to stand against the wiles of the devil. And so what we find ourselves doing, just like the people back in this day, is succumbing to those influences, succumbing to those people and those influences that are around us, and we don't have the tools to fight against it.
That's right.
Now, once again, we can sit here as victims and say, well, I don't have the tools. I don't know. It's not your fault that you don't know, but it is your problem. Well, what are we going to do in order to strengthen ourselves so we can stand strong no matter what influences are around us? Because God was still present. God was still guiding. God was still there and available to these people. However, they just happened to fall into a trap in which they started to look upon the influences of those who were around and valuing that more than the God of their ancestors. So the question is not about what happened in the past. The question is not about what your friends or what your parents or what anyone else around you has done. The question is, what are you going to do with the relationship with God that you have today? Whether it was something that you set down and set aside years ago or something that you've never had, there is enough evidence in the world around us to point to the fact that there is a living God on a throne somewhere. We just have to challenge ourselves to say, are we willing to lean into that far enough to where we can say, I need to find out more about this God that I don't know about? Or are we okay with the consequences of not doing that? Are we okay with just living a life that's not pleasing to God? Are we okay with all of the things that are happening to these people that were written back then that are still applicable now to those who do not value their relationship with God enough to say, I'm going to live life differently? That's the question for our generation today. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that, that's the reason, most of the time, if you can look among the people and see what they're doing, then to get good fruit, you have to set your roots in good soil.
There you go.
Because if you don't set your roots in good soil, you're not going to get it.
There you go. And even if you're in good soil, what else is going to grow around you?
Weeds. Tear.
So it's not just about sitting there in good soil. You can be in good soil,
Yeah.
but when the weeds come, you got to get them things out of there.
You got to get them out.
And you got to get them out early enough.
That's right.
Because if you wait too late, then you can't pull up that weed without damaging yourself.
Exactly.
So some of us are complaining about the difficulty of our life in this season. Well, you are now living the fruit of you not pulling up that weed easy. So now when you rip that grown weed up, it's going to hurt you a little bit because you went through life damaged. And because now that you're now deciding to move forward, now that you're deciding to take a step in the right direction, it's going to be some collateral damage. It's going to be some collateral damage to get that person out of your life. It's going to be some collateral damage to get out of that bad relationship. There are going to be some things that impact you negatively because you waited. And so now then we get upset with God saying, God, now that I chose you, my life is getting more difficult. Yeah, you chose me, but I can't change those decisions you made in the past. There are still repercussions. There are still consequences to those decisions that you made in the past. So what my promise to you is that your life will be better. Your future will be brighter than your past, but it's going to take some work to get there. And that work is as comfortable as the decisions you've made in your past, because those consequences are still on their way to your front door. Any questions about that? I know, right? Look, like I said, I don't even know where I am in my notes. But let's go to your point. You talked about the fact that God said kill everybody. So let's pull up Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 16 through 18. I wanted to make sure we set the tone so you know where all of this is coming from and how we got here. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 16 through 18. I'm reading from NIV. It says, however, in the cities of the nations that the Lord is giving you as an inheritance. You're inheriting these countries, you're inheriting these areas, but there's still work for you to do. In the cities and nations your Lord is giving you as an inheritance, do not leave anything that breathes. That's right. When we say kill everything, everybody. That's right. Verse 17, completely destroy them. I don't want you to write these down, but listen to the names. The Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, as the Lord your God commanded you. Now get this. He told them to do that, right? Yeah. Verse 18, he said, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen if you don't. Otherwise, they will teach you to follow all the detestable things they do and worshiping their gods, and you will sin against the Lord your God. Yes. When he told you what to do, he also told you what would happen if you didn't do it. So what do you think they did? They had the information, they had the command, and they had the repercussion. You know that they listened, right? No. They made a choice, you're right, but they chose wrong, just like us. We got this full book of knowing the nature of our God, of knowing how our God approaches his children, yet we still make the wrong choice. So what did they do? They went out here and they fought. They actually did go to war. They actually did go to battle, but they did not follow instructions to its completion. They did 90% of the mission. We're going to kill just about everyone, but they didn't kill everybody. And so some people got away. Some people were allowed to live. And because of their inability to follow instructions in their totality, they find themselves living the fruit of that decision. And so what I think is so important that we pull out of this is the concept of half-bit holiness. But where we want to live holy, we desire to live holy. We write down everything we need to do to live holy. But when it comes time to live those things out, we live it out half-bit. When we live it out half-hearted, we only do half of the work that's required. And because our old life was so bad, now that when we start doing half-bit stuff, it looks like we pure. Until we go back to the book and see what's required of us, until we go back to that original, what God communicated to us as to what was required of us. Something that looks off-white looks real white until you put it next to real white. That off-white looks good and looks clean next to a black suit. But let someone with pure white walk by you and you're like, you look dingy. You look dirty. I got a bunch of white t-shirts, and I think they look white. And for some reason, my eyes are different than my wife's eyes, because she be like, what you doing with that dingy t-shirt? And I still wear it. But there's truth to this. There's truth to this. And so half-bit holiness is the understanding that problems as big as this, because a lot of times we don't think there's that much difference between half-bit holiness and full holiness. You know, God said, love everybody. Well, I can love everybody except that one person. And if I take care of the 99, he'll look at me favorably. Well, they killed everybody except for that one group, or that one family, or that one group of people. And because they didn't do so, this led to that, which ultimately led to God being so angry with them, he turned them over to other people. So what we have to stop doing is minimizing the importance of listening, of following, and leaning completely into what God has called us to do. Because that 1% of disobedience is enough to completely pull you out of the will of God. That there are no consolation prizes when we're trying to live for God. There are no, here's a trophy for second place. Here's a participation award. There's nothing like that. The God we serve is either you are holy or you are not. Either you are righteous or you are not. Now, we got Jesus to stand in the middle to bridge that gap, which helps us on our path towards salvation and helps us on our path towards getting our way to heaven. But once our soul is settled with those people who are set apart from God, once we walk down this aisle and say, God, I believe in your son. I believe that he was died, he was buried and resurrected. Now my soul is saved. Once that has been set apart, the black or whiteness of the Bible and its promises aren't changed. That's right. The requirements aren't changed. And so whether you are living completely right or you were living a half-bit holiness, those things take into account, or those things impact how in the world your life is going to look. Yeah. When God says, okay, let me look at the promises I made today. Let me bring up Miss Mary's life. And did she live half-bit or whole bit? There ain't no half-bit check up there. Did you hold up your end of the bargain or not? Because God said, if you're going to hold me to my promises, I'm going to hold you to the requirements. If you're going to sit here and pray to me and say, God, your word said this, keep reading and find out what his word said about what is required of you. And did you live up to it in its totality, or were you living a half-bit holiness, looking for a whole bit of promise to be given back to you? Yes, ma'am.
I was just about to say, the word tells us have no other God before you, before him. But serve him and serve him only. He wants us to serve him wholeheartedly and not half-bit. And then it came to mind, when the lost sheep, I'm just paraphrasing it. 99 was accounted for.
There you go.
And one was not accounted for, but God wanted all of them.
All of them.
So they were looking for the one that was lost.
There you go.
And, that just came to mind when you was explaining.
And that's the thing. That's the funny part about Christianity, right? We want it when it's convenient.
Yes.
Don't leave me when I'm the one out of the 99.
That's right.
But when I only want to follow 99% of what you said, we just want him to just throw in that extra percent. We just want him to forget about that extra percent until that extra percent is us. We can't pick and choose which way we want God to act. Either we're going to lean in, believe, and love the nature of who he is and the fact that he doesn't change no matter what domain of life we're looking at, or we're going to slip and slide and have this half-bit holiness and find ourselves not standing outside looking in of salvation. Because if you believe that's set in stone through the power of what Jesus Christ did for you, making up the gap. So we're not talking about salvation. We're talking about the acceptance of his promises based upon his requirements. Right. Did you completely follow his requirement? If you completely followed his requirement, and you can say, God, your book say this, and the promise that goes along with it says this. Well, what's going on? Why am I not seeing it? But if you aren't going to live according to his word, when you take said promise to him, he's going to be like, yeah. This says this, but you ain't do the requirement part. I don't know what you waiting on me for, but you're not living up to par. And so it's so important that we recognize that, and I always want to say this just to make sure we're not misleading anybody. Salvation, great. You missed the boat. Jesus stepped in. You believed in him. He died, buried, was resurrected for your sins. He's making up the gap between what you couldn't do and what God's requirements were. But as we look at these promises and saying, I want this abundance, I want this, I want that, I want everything that's written in the word for me, we got to recognize that there are requirements to it. There are not requirements, consequences, good or bad, to every decision that we make. So whether it's a good consequence, great. You lived up to it. You get everything that's you deserve. If it's a bad consequence, great. You get everything that you deserve. Now, what we want to recognize is that God's grace lives in abundance through even our bad decisions. And so God's grace can come and say, you missed the mark, but here's grace. You missed the mark, you tried, but you didn't make it, here's grace. His grace, it renews every morning that the sun rises. But the question for you is, when you look at that word and look at all of those promises that are written down for you, do you want to live a life that's based and required upon grace? To where you're hoping that he has a good day, you're hoping that he looks favorably upon you making that bad decision? Or do you want to live a life to where if your life has stopped moving, if your life isn't going in the direction that you need it to go, if your life is not looking in alignment to what God has said, that you know it's not you, it must be God that has you in a holding pattern. You see, a lot of times we live life and we're so unsure about, God, what is your purpose? God, what are you doing in this season? But I believe if we stopped living a half-bit holiness, we would find a lot of assurance in the fact that if it's not me and how I'm living my life, then it must be the head of my life that stopped me from moving for one reason or another. Yes. You see, when we're making bad decisions, we don't know whether God is punishing us. We don't know whether this is the consequences of our actions. We don't know any of those things because there is no firm foundation in which we can look back on the word and say, your promise said this, because he said, love your neighbor, but we don't really love our neighbor. We just do it when it's convenient or do it when it happens to be someone. When pastor walks in a room, let me be nice and love my neighbor. But what would happen if we truly took the last however months of this year and lived according to the word? Yes, we're going to fail. Yes, we're going to make mistakes. But we still live according to the word and repent and turn away from those behaviors. What in the world would happen if we lived that way and then looked at God and said, God, what's happening here? You have a lot more confidence in what God promises to you when you know that 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 you are holding up your end of the bargain. But so many of us live in the gray area between what God requires and what we hope his grace would overcome, to the point that we don't even have confidence when we pray because we know in the back of our mind what we just got done doing, didn't repent for it, and have no intent on stopping at any given point in time. You want to say something?
No, I'm just, oh, you got it.
Let me find out. I don't even know where I am, Lord. Y'all got me up here. y'all got me all messed up over here. I don't even know where to go next, y'all. I had a plan.
14, I think, verse 14. Or 13, I think.
Yeah, he done 17, he done 15, 16, 17.
Okay, let's go to verse 10, actually. Judges 2, 10 through 12.
Okay.
All right, it says, after the whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, after a whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, what does that mean? They dead. So I went to go see my great-great-grandpa. Sounds real cute, don't it? But he dead, so I'm dead. So that whole generation died. After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what the Lord had done for Israel. So they trained up a whole generation of children, and they didn't know, They didn't teach them. They didn't know God, nor did they know the amazing things that God had done for them. So when we talk about this generation of people, they are completely unprepared or untaught as to what they need to move forward. What does the Bible say? Train the child up in the way what? They should go. So when they grow old, they will not depart. So they weren't trained up. So when they got old, they just out here doing stuff. And you know how children are. When they see their grandmama, I don't know what she over there babbling about. I don't know what she doing. Not even realizing that's the only thing keeping them alive right now. But they were not trained up in the way that they should go, nor what God had done for them in their lives. And I think there's so much wrapped up in this particular scripture, because not only should we train our children about the God we serve, but also talk about what God has done for us when it's appropriate, when they're mature enough to handle it. Talk about how God led us through, how God protected us. You know, baby boy, when this happened and you thought this and this and this was happening, this will really happen. And being able to have that conversation so when they get to their difficult times, they know they can draw from that same well, have that same cheat code that we had that got us up out of our difficult situations when we made the wrong decisions.
I think a lot of the issue is that even like in our generation, our parents were so headstrong on making us go to church. Then the next generation came along and said, well, I hated it when my parents made me go to church, so I'm going to give you a choice. And in the midst of giving the children that choice, they now don't know about God in today's time. And Dr. Shaw had referenced before about all the killings going on. It's because, you know, we wanted to give them a choice. They chose. God is not in the picture. Now we have this world that is destroying itself.
But there are three failures wrapped in that one failure. So number one, we decided that we're not going to make our children go to church. Okay, that's one failure, right?
Okay.
Well, if they never step foot in a church, they should still see God. You should train them up at home. It didn't say send them off to another person to train them up. It said you train them up. You train them up in the way that they should go. And so we just passed that responsibility off to our church or off to our favorite YouTube pastor or whomever else. We just passed that responsibility off, but that responsibility is yours first. So the first failure was that you didn't train them. The second failure is that you didn't make them go. The third failure, and this is the part we don't want to talk about, is if you don't open up your mouth about God, if you don't send them somewhere to where they should encounter God, why don't they see them? Why don't they see God in how you live your life? But why don't they see you pray? Why don't they hear you pray? Why don't they see you walking in faith? Why don't they see you making decisions that don't make no sense? And your answer is, I don't know why, but God told me to do this crazy mess. Wow. So they're not seeing God in our life. They're not hearing God in how we're teaching them, and they're not being brought to a place to teach them God. So we're failing in all three categories and wondering why the world looks the way that it looks today. Yes, ma'am.
What I wanted to just add and piggyback on, you know, when my grandchildren were younger, I had Bible class at my house for them.
There you go.
We had like pizza night. They had to come to Bible class to get whatever was there. And, you know, because I had 13 of them.
Oh, my. You 13 what?
I have 13 grands.
Oh, I thought you said children. I was like, Lord.
No, I just have 5 children.
Okay, gotcha.
And so I would have Bible class in my home
There you
until
go.
they grew up.
There you go.
And the mother would take them to church religiously, but they had to come to that house.
There you go.
And then when I would pray with them, you know, if all 13 of them were there or 10 of them was there, guess what? I pray for each one of them.
There you
and
go.
when they get through, Granny, I'm glad you made this prayer short. Because I pray for each one of them, you know, and I go by and touch them and pray.
Yeah,
And I think that, you know, that helped them a lot.
absolutely. It showed them and modeled it for them.
Yeah, and even Yasma, the one that does the singing, she'd laugh.
Because go ahead.
But look at her now.
Yeah, exactly. That teaches them how to pray. That teaches them what prayer sounds like. And that teaches them the discipline of somebody didn't die today, but we're still praying. Nothing bad happened today, but we're still praying. And I care so much about you that I want to cover you in prayer, not just because that something's going wrong, but just because I want you to wake up tomorrow morning. It teaches them to pray about everything without ceasing, even if you never require it of them to pray themselves. But we have to first recognize in our own lives, in our children's lives, maybe in our grandchildren's lives, that they should see it just by observing us.
That's right.
We should also be able to guide them into that prayer space. And then 3, hopefully there's a Bible-believing, Bible-teaching church somewhere around, then which you can bring them to where that's also enforced by a voice that's not your own. But let's not fail in all 3 cases and then hope and pray that when situations come up and that phone rings in the middle of the night because they've been in an accident, let's not try to reconnect it at that point. Let's hope that lifeline is already connected, already there, already in place, waiting to be break glass in case of emergencies, already there. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
I want to go through one more verse really, really quickly. I want to go to 13 through 15. So it talks about the children didn't learn. It talks about them worshiping various gods of the people around them because of the original root of the problem where they didn't kill everybody their ancestors didn't kill everybody that God told them to. So now they're now surrounded by people who believe in things that they shouldn't believe about. Verse 12 and verse 13, or verse 13 through 15, reads like this. It says, because they forsook him and served Baal and the Ashtoreths. What is Ashtoreths? What is that?
It's about
False god. Yeah, it's a Canaanite goddess. So you remember when we said, listen to the names of these people, the Canaanites they were supposed to all kill? That's one of their gods. In his anger against Israel, the Lord gave them into the hands of the raiders who plundered them. He sold them into the hands of their enemies all around, whom they no longer were able to resist. Whenever the Lord went out to fight, the hand of the Lord was against them to defeat them. Just as he had sworn to them, they were in great distress. The question is, who are you fighting in your life? When life gets difficult, are you fighting the devil? Are you fighting the world? Are you fighting circumstances? Or based upon your decisions, are you fighting God and wondering why you losing? But maybe the difficulty we find in our lives isn't because of the devil trying to come against us, isn't because of all of those things. Maybe the difficulty we find in our lives is because we go to bed with the devil every night. And the hand that's against us is the hand of God, because we sleeping with the devil. Me and the devil on good terms. We love that. Me and the devil having a great time. But the battle when you go outside of your household is with the God that actually controls everything, not the devil that you slip and slide and live your half-bit holiness along with every night. Maybe sometimes we need to look in the mirror and say, why in the world is our life looking like this? And not look so much outside, but look at our own decisions and say, are we living a life that is conducive or aligns with the word? Or are we aligning with the word, but just the wrong part? But we want to align with the blessings of yes and amen, the abundance and the overflow. And God said, no, that ain't your verse. Your verse is a little bit lower when we talk about this fire and brimstone and we talk about all these difficult things. That's your verse. That's the verse that aligns with how you're living, not the blessings and not the abundance, but the way you live your life, the way you make your decisions. You chose verse 12, not verse 10. You chose this verse down here, but not those things above. And we live our lives hoping, praying, and believing that we're going to get all these blessings, all these promises, all these miracles when it's convenient. And then we want to come in here, ask Pastor to pray till he blew in the face, and ask Pastor to deliver us, and ask Pastor to use his connection to save us. When God is saying, Pastor, I know, you, I don't know. Who are you? I hear from Pastor every week. I don't hear from you. But we want all of the blessings, all the good parts, but we don't want any of the work. We want all the miracles, but we don't want any of the discipline. We want all the good things, but we don't want any of the consistency that it takes to pray over both ourselves as well as our children and our grandchildren. And then we look around the world and say, the world has failed us. But you are the world. The world looks like you. The world lives like you. A question we need to ask ourselves is, if the entire world had the relationship with God that you had, would it be better or would it be the same? Look, let me close it. Y'all like my pre-prepared stuff better. Any questions before we close out? I went through that really, really quick, but I think it was still good.
It was good. Amazing.
Any questions before we close out?
No.
Close. Thank you so much for joining us here for Sunday School. I hope I haven't made y'all mad and y'all won't come back at 11 a.m. But we'll be getting started here in about 7 minutes with our Sunday morning service here in the house at Harvest of Hope Christian Center at 11 a.m. I want to encourage you, there's still time for you to hop in the car. There's still time for you to come out and worship with us. There is an amazing word from the Lord here for you today, and I think that it's something that can change your life. So let's not let this moment pass. Let's not let us visit Bedside Baptist looking for a completely big miracle when we're not bold enough to get up out of bed ourselves. Let's make time. Let's make an effort. Let's get up out of bed. Let's make our way to church. And I will